Hi, everybody. Well, we're back here again with Where Are We Now? This is a podcast, a webinar that Workbook has been doing with dear art producer Heather. Brought us this idea. Gosh, Heather, it feels like 5 years ago, but I think it was honestly, I think it was only 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. But we're now best friends. No, I'm kidding. But Heather brought us this idea because of all of the confusion and things that were going on in our industry. And this is our 4th webinar. Can't thank the people who agree to be involved with this enough. I actually specifically want to say a big thank you to Jim Hudak. He's on the screen. I don't know if you can't see him, but he's there and he's always there. And he's the one who's brought all of this together and made it happen so seamlessly. So just a big thank you for Jim Hudak, who's been with Workbook for a bazillion years, and we're just so thankful he is. On with the panel, we've had a lot of concerns and so on about finances, and last week we certainly talked about financial resources. Those things are changing on the all the time, and so we thought it would be important to talk about it again. I cannot thank our panelists enough for taking time out of their days. I know this is a crazy busy time for both of you, so please just know that we all just thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I'd like to start off by talking about Lisa Thorne. She's with New Insight Accounting, and she's the owner. Lisa is an accountant with over 20 years of experience. She is the owner of New Insight Accounting, who performs bookkeeping and advisory services for small businesses and sole proprietors, many of who are in the creative profession. She is an elite level QuickBooks Pro advisor. Prior to that, she was a former CPA as a public accounting auditor and corporate accounting manager. She lives in Oakland, California with her family. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
You're welcome.
And John Rockwell. John Rockwell is a business development officer at TMC Financing. He said that I could edit his profile, so I hope I picked the right things, John, but this will teach you. John Rockwell is a business development officer at TMC Financing Southern California team, serving lenders, brokers, small businesses throughout the greater Los Angeles area. John has a well-versed background, perfectly suited for business development at TMC Financing, having experience in energy efficiency, asset management, and client management. John also has experience as a small business owner. He's a graduate of the University of Southern California. Go Trojans. Heather Elder. Heather Elder, as I said, brought us this idea, and I can't be, more thankful that she did. She's an artist representative. Heather has been an agent for over 20 years. She hosts the Dear Art Producer podcasts, writes a blog about the industry, and hosts a site for freelance art producers. Mostly, though, she is always thinking ahead, and what better time to do that than now. No kidding. Me, I'm just going to, keep it simple. I've been with Workbook for about 6 years now. I get the pleasure of being a supportive force in the businesses and the lives of my clients, which perfectly suits my personality. And their successes are my successes. And so, I really, my likes are karate, karaoke, lilacs, watching my kids play anything. My husband of 32 years, potatoes, my Christmas tree, and big dogs. So thank you. Let's start this out by explaining some of the current offerings. I think I'm going to go to John first. So why don't you, what are the relief programs currently available, and who do they benefit, and what are their restrictions?
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. So I think I'm going to do a brief intro on the SBA disaster loan program. And then Lisa will talk a little bit about the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. So the main difference between those two, the disaster loan program is between you, the small business owner, and the SBA directly. You go to the SBA's website, you apply for the loan there, and there's no bank or intermediary involved in that process or in that transaction. The interesting thing about the disaster loan program is that it's historically been used for sort of physical, local disasters where the applicant pool is relatively small. Having it rolled out immediately on a nationwide basis has completely overwhelmed the system and had the SBA kind of force them to react with a variety of changes in both the application process and the program itself. So if you applied 3 weeks ago, the application process was different than it is today. They've done a lot in terms of trying to streamline the process, both on the borrower side and on their underwriting side as well. But the basics of that program are that the disaster loan program itself is not a forgivable loan. It's not free money, but they do have a up to $10,000 grant component of that loan. You just have to check a box during the application process, and you can get up to $10,000 in a grant, which is essentially a forgivable portion of that loan, aka free money portion of that loan. The anything you get above and beyond that up to $10,000 is kind of a traditional loan. It looks a lot like a kind of like home mortgage in the way that it's structured. It's a 30-year loan. It's 3.75% fixed for that whole duration, and you can pay it back whenever. There's no prepayment penalty. There's no fees. As soon as you're comfortably able to financially pay it back, you can. But it is not forgivable beyond that initial up to $10,000 amount. Now, as far as I know, nobody has gotten the grant part yet. Some people's loans have been approved, but in terms of dollars actually hitting the bank accounts, that grant part is lagging a little bit behind their initial kind of marketing of the program. I hear anecdotally that it might start today, but I haven't gotten any confirmation of that from any of the people that I talked to. But that's the program in a nutshell. I can go more into the calculation of the loan amount later on if we want to do that. But in terms of an overview, that's the quote unquote disaster / EIDL / grant program.
Thank you. And then, and Lisa, if you wouldn't mind going into the was it the PPP? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before I say that, I guess I first say the first line of attack might actually be unemployment. We don't want to forget about that. Because if you lost your job or don't have income coming in, or if you are an employer that has employees that you can't afford to pay, the first line of attack should be have everybody file for unemployment. And we could talk about more details there. Each state has their own criteria and application process, but the feds, as part of the CARES Act, they did increase the qualification benefits and different benefits, so we can talk about that. But the Paycheck Protection Plan is also part of the CARES Act, and that's another different kind of SBA loan that you can apply for, and it's SBA backed, but the main differences are that you have to apply through a bank. And I think you guys talked about this last week also, but just a summary again is it's kind of been a hot mess. The applications went live last week. And every bank, it's kind of up to themselves to decide if they're going to participate and come up with their own application process within the terms. And I've been hearing a variety of stories about which banks are accepting applications, which banks are not. So we could talk about that. But the main thing is that the first bank you should go to is the one that you have a banking relationship with first. The main premise of this loan is for mainly employers who have payroll to be able to hire their staff back if they've been on unemployment, or to be able to continue to pay their staff to get people working again. And so the loan proceeds is calculated based on 2.5 times your monthly average payroll costs. So there's some nuances as to what goes into that calculation we can talk about. And so far, small businesses who have W-2 employees on payroll can qualify. Supposedly effective today, April 10th, they're opening up the application process for sole proprietors who have no W-2 employees. And I was combing the internet this morning trying to find out, okay, today's the day it's live. What are the terms? And I have found out some information, but not clearly. The other main thing about this plan is that there is a forgiveness portion. On paper, it sounds really good that your loan can be forgiven 100%. After 8 weeks, if you follow the rules and spend the money on the approved things, which basically is if you spend 75% of your funds on payroll, based on what's qualified, then you can get it forgiven. And 25% of it can be spent on other qualifying costs, mainly rent, the interest portion of your mortgage or utilities or other type of approved operating costs. And there are some limitations. The key thing is that that's going to be a separate approval process. So you want to be very careful to maintain good records of how you're spending your money, maybe keep your funds in a separate account and only draw from there. What was I going to say? So yeah, I mean, that's the basic. You're gonna, once you get approved for the loan, you're then gonna have to file an application process in 8 weeks to get the forgiveness. And we don't really know what the proof is going to look like. I can venture some guesses. And then for the payments that are not forgiven, it turns into a loan. And the great thing about that is that it's a very short, it's a 2-year payback period versus the SBA loans, which is a much longer term, and but it's only a 1% interest rate, so it's a very low interest rate. And the other great thing is that they're not going to ask for any collateral or personal guarantees that's normally required for a business SBA loan, or traditional loans for that matter. And then lastly, you don't have to start paying back the payments for 6 months. So that's the gist of it. What I've learned so far is if you do not have employees, and if starting today, banks will probably start the application process for these loans for sole proprietors. A guess I've heard is that since you don't have payroll in the loan, the proceeds are based on 2.5 times average monthly payroll. They're going to base it on your self-employment net income. So if you've filed your tax return already, and if you have a Schedule C, so basically if you're a sole proprietor or an independent contractor, you have a business, then usually you would file in your regular tax return a Schedule C, and that is your net business income. And basically you would take that line, I can tell you what line on the tax return it is, divide it by 12 and multiply it by 2.5. That is your average net income basically. If you have not filed your tax return yet, then I think they're going to probably take 1099. So if you received a 1099 from one or multiple employers, then that would be your gross income. There's some nuances maybe we could talk about later about the difference between that and minusing expenses. I don't know if I should go into that now, but I have a couple thoughts about that. And then the other thing I should mention now, in terms of, since we're summarizing, we have these 2 different SBA loans, and then we have unemployment. And then the other funding option is if you don't end up getting any of these loans and you do have W-2 employees, you still also have a payroll tax credit that you can get some relief from. And that you can get if you don't get any loan or grant proceeds. You can, I have to look it up again, but basically there's a limit, I think, for every employee you pay wages to during this covered period of time. You can get a payroll tax credit of $5,000 for each employee, is kind of the high level And you get it by basically not having to pay the payroll taxes that you will have to pay on this salary. So there's a little bit of a time lag in getting the relief, but it's that's a help too.
Okay, so I would love to know, I'm going to go right into the questions from our outline. I am a photographer, sole proprietor with no employees. What are my options with collateral and without?
Well, yeah, I think we kind of just touched on that. The biggest thing is with collateral, the SBA loans that that John just talked about. You definitely can apply for that if you have no employees. And the payroll protection plan that we just talked about, also, you don't need any collateral at all. And supposedly starting today, the banks will be rolling out an application process for you as well.
What about doing these in conjunction? Can you apply for everything and then see what you get and decide what you want?
Yes, that actually is suggested, that you definitely can go ahead and apply for everything, which is recommended because you don't know what you're going to get, and then you wait and see what you get, and then you'll have an opportunity to decide which one to take. You could always turn it down if you get approved for a loan. The one thing is you can't double dip, so you can't get relieved for the same thing twice. So like if you end up getting an emergency $10,000 grant, you're going to have to reduce it from what gets relieved from the Paycheck Protection Plan. You can get both loans. Let's say you have some payroll and then you have a lot of other expenses. You can get relief from the amount of payroll you pay on the payroll protection plan, and then you can use the other proceeds from the other loan to pay other operational expenses. But you just can't get relief both sides, and also you can't get the payroll tax credit if you're getting relief from these other funds. And also, last thing is you can't double dip with unemployment. So if you're getting unemployment, then, and it is advised, if I'm trying to get if I'm trying to get one of these loans, should I have my employees go on unemployment or should I go on unemployment? And the answer is yes, because you can go on unemployment in the meantime. And once the proceeds come, then you can go off unemployment and use these proceeds,
hire
but you
yourself
can't
back.
do both at the same time.
And you hire yourself back is
Right.
what you're saying. Okay. That was exactly. Now, my next question is,
wait, Heidi,
Sure.
can I interrupt you for just a second to get
Absolutely.
a clarification on something? Sorry to interrupt.
No.
The payroll tax credit, I just want to confirm that you can't ask for that credit if you've received the PPP loan. So if I use that money to pay for my employees and keep them employed, I still need to pay the payroll tax on that money that I'm paying them to keep them employed. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and so forgive me if this is a dopey question, but the same question that I just asked you about the sole proprietors, and I know that you went through it in the beginning, but is the answer the same for an S Corp, an LLC? Is the answer the same regardless of the structure of your business?
If you are an S Corp, you are able to have yourself be an employee. So if that's the case and you're on payroll and you're paying yourself a legitimate paycheck through payroll and you're paying payroll taxes, then you can be considered an employee on payroll and get the PPP and use that to pay yourself a salary. That's my understanding. If you are an LLC, or even if you're S Corp and you're not taking payroll, then you would be, I think then you would be in the category of without payroll, sole proprietor.
And 1099 figures in there as well? Am I just not understanding the different entities?
What's that?
And the 1099 fits into that all as well?
Yeah, 1099s is the same as a sole proprietor, is the same for an independent contractor.
Okay, so this next one's I'm sorry, Heather, did you have a deeper?
I had a follow up on someone's texting me a question about the payroll tax. So say you don't get your loan for the PPP loan until, let's say, 2 weeks from now. Can you ask for a payroll tax credit on payroll that you've been paying up until then, up until you get your loan?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I have to think about that.
So while you're thinking about that, I'd love to ask John. This is a question that we have. My bank won't talk to me unless I have an existing business line of credit. I never needed one. What do I do? And can I go directly to the SBA?
So that's most likely in relation to the PPP loan. A lot of banks are instituting policies at this point in time where you need to be some type of current customer, and they all are pushing it a little differently. Some require you to be a borrower. Some require you to be a deposit relationship.
A borrower meaning I have to have a business credit card? Is that what that means?
Or a credit card or a loan with them or a line of credit. They're all putting in their own level of arbitrary
but on the business level, not necessarily. But on the business level, like what I have all of my accounts with one bank, our business accounts and our personal accounts. But if I have a personal relationship with my bank and a business account where they handle a lot of my personal loans, like my mortgage or whatever, does that help me, or does it have to be business related loans, credit cards, accounts?
So it's completely dependent on the individual bank. So it's not one size fits all. So definitely understand where your bank is willing to be flexible or not in that regard. And if they're not, you can go to a non-bank SBA lender and apply as a walk-in. Basically you have no relationship with them. And there's a variety of those out there that people may or may not have heard of. There's kind of like the traditional SBA non-bank lenders like Harvest or Liberty or Centerstone or ReadyCap. Then there's also the ones that were previously like fintech, but now they're, because of this kind of call to action, they're starting to participate in SBA like Cabbage and Bowfly. And I think those are the only two that I know of off the top of my head. But you can go to any of those people that I just named websites and start the application process there. And that's probably the easiest way to do it on a transactional sort of non-relationship basis. You can search around for banks that may be accepting walk-ins, but at this point, it's more often than not, they're only servicing their existing customers just because of sheer demand. Like I know Chase Bank has, yeah.
And when you say walk-ins, like branches are open?
I mean in the completely figurative sense. Yeah, no. So the non-relationship sense. That you have no prior existing relationship with that financial institution. So your application, call in, online in, all that type of interaction.
No, I just, it wasn't until this second I even thought if I went to my bank, could I walk in the doors? I can't right now, can I? But banks are closed, aren't they? The doors wise.
I think some are open.
Mostly. Some.
I walked by Wells Fargo in my neighborhood yesterday, and they had the social distancing line where people were standing in line to walk in.
Well, it's clearly an essential business. Let's be fair, right? Yeah. So
some people have to deposit their checks that way, or get money that way.
Okay, so my next question, and I'm not trying to ignore you, Lisa, because I think you're so super smart, but this next one really is a good one for John. Can I get a regular SBA loan right now? How does that work? Do I need collateral, and can I use my house?
Yeah, there's no technical reason why you can't get a regular SBA loan right now. All those programs are open for business. The 504 program for real estate and equipment, the 7A program for business working capital of all shapes and sizes, SBA line of credit, SBA express loan. The problem is that banks are so overwhelmed by their PPP volumes that they're effectively putting those traditional programs on hiatus while they catch up and basically get their arms around the volume of PPP. So it's a case-by-case basis on if your bank or if your lending institution will be actively participating in those programs today. You know, that answer could change a week from now, 2 weeks from now. So there's no SBA moratorium, there's no government moratorium on those programs. They should be open for business, but it's going to depend on if your bank is devoting manpower and hours and sort of, you know, prioritizing it appropriately. So unfortunately, check with your bank. So my specialty, my company, TMC Financing, we're an SBA 504 lender. So the only thing we're licensed to do right now by the government is do the government second mortgage when a small business owner is doing an SBA 504. So that kind of, without getting too in the weeds, that basically makes my day-to-day be constant communication with banks of all shapes and sizes, the Chases, the B of A's, the Wells, all the way down to the community banks, all the way down to the kind of SBA specific lenders that most people have never heard of. And so unfortunately, the only thing I can say for certain is that they're all approaching it differently. So they all have different policies on, are they doing 504s? Are they doing 7As? Some yes, some no. How are they handling PPPs? Some are accepting calls from non-relationship banks or non-relationship potential borrowers and small business owners. And the vice versa is also true. So to Lisa's earlier point, you know, start with the bank that you know the best, get a full understanding of how they're approaching all of these things, the PPP, the traditional SBA lending vehicles, and then kind of branch out from there. I mean, I'm definitely available. I can share my contact info if people want to sort of get a list of lenders that are accepting quote unquote walk-ins for like PPP.
I would love that.
And different traditional stuff, yeah.
I want that list. You know, giving resources to the attendees is always super helpful. So I would love that list so that we can share that on our site if that's something you're comfortable with.
One thing I wanted to add there,
definitely.
I actually heard on Gusto, you know, Gusto payroll service, they actually have a resource where it's a live Google Doc, Google Sheet with the banks and what their status is. So it's not static, but it's like which banks are accepting applications, which ones are closed, which ones aren't participating.
I want that link. I want that link. Please, please, please send that to us. Thank you for both of you. So my next question is, I use a payroll service that is the employer of record. Can I still get a grant?
Yes, you can. I actually know of somebody, luckily I read that question last night. I'm like, oh, I know somebody that is in that situation and I know she already applied. And so I emailed her last night and she said, yes. So she has, her payroll processor is they're the employer for, you know, so they could get benefits from that. And she said, yes, because they're the ones paying it and they have the payroll registers, you know, coming out of their account, then yes, they can count that and they qualify still.
I have a question that someone texted about 2019 payroll versus 2020. They have some employees that were given raises in 2020, and that's not reflected in obviously the 2019 average payroll, monthly payroll. Is there a way to account for that?
I can answer. I don't know if John has a more specific. Maybe I'll say what I say, and John, since you might know the applications better, you might be able to say better. I don't know, but
sure.
From my understanding, you want to. This is just going to be what's going to help determine what your loan proceeds are, and you want to provide the payroll information. First of all, what specifically is being asked of you, because each bank application might be a little bit different. So some might want the last 12 months, some might want calendar year 2019, some might want this year, and it also depends on your situation. And what my client was in this situation, and what I said, I don't know if this is right or not, but I said, provide them what they're asking for, which was calendar year last year, and hopefully you can find a place to add a commentary or description saying the difference. Yes, I hired somebody new in January that's not reflected, and her salary is X. So hopefully they'll take that into consideration. I'm sure at some point before you actually get approved, you'll be able to have either a conversation or provide more commentary on the situation. So hopefully that'll be taken into consideration. But the one thing you want to keep in mind is regardless of what amount you get approved for, you still can use it to get relieved based on your actual cost and the time. So
right, I would actually like that situation better because you're going to absolutely be able to easily meet that 75% threshold if you have a higher payroll now than you did in 2019 when it was calculated. So, you know, it's like an opportunity cost for the small business owner to consider, but it could be kind of like a slam dunk easy way for them to get 100% forgiveness. Lisa, sorry to cut you off, but one of the policy documents I'm looking at for one of the bigger banks says that they will do the either of the last 12 months of payroll or 2019. So it's kind of up to the small business owner as to how they want to apply. Unfortunately, you know, that's that one bank. I'm guessing maybe some of the more automated, hands-off, less relationship-oriented lenders might have a slightly more regimented application process where they can only like submit the 2019, for example. But it's definitely possible for them to capture that 2020 payroll amount in an application, but they need to work with the lender to make sure that that lender is aware of what they're doing and making it as easy as possible.
Yeah, and one thing to add is, you know, just keep in mind that even though obviously you want as much of a windfall as possible, you want to be able to be approved for as much as you can, but you also want to be careful and only take the money that you think you'll be able to get relieved, you know. So I mean, it's still a good loan anyway, actually, but the closer aligned with what you're actually going to be spending in the next 8 weeks, the better, you know, because that's
right.
what you're going to
if
get.
You take that money and spend it all on your employees, that's 100% forgiven, correct?
Correct.
And you had said, though, that there's a secondary process about the forgiveness. And so that's what you're talking about. Keep really, you know, detailed records, make sure that you can show and do not use what you don't have to use, right?
Well, you want to try to use all the funds you get on the approved costs. I don't think anybody knows yet exactly what the documentation is going to look like that they're going to require. I don't know if each bank is going to be different, and I don't think they even know yet. They're just focusing on this round first, and then in 8 weeks' time, you're going to have to then apply for the relief. And so we don't really know what that's going to look like, but it's going to definitely be some kind of documentation. You're going to have to prove what you spent the money on.
Right. So somebody just asked this question for the PPP loan for sole proprietors to show rent, utilities, et cetera. What if I work from home? And what can you count? If you are a sole proprietor, you're getting the PPP relief loan. What can they show in terms of rent? And what can you count?
That is the question of the day.
Okay.
I think the sole proprietor question with no payroll is still like the big unknown. That again, today is the day they were supposed to publish it. I have yet to see an official publishing. Maybe I'll take the moment to go into now what the one thing I did read this morning, and I don't know if somebody will fact check me or not, but from my understanding, you can, so I mean, this is a thing. If you filed your tax return last year, or for 2019, or if you haven't, I think they will take 2018 as well. So either 2018, 2019, you look at what your net taxable business income is on your Schedule C, which would be your gross income from your 1099s minus whatever business expenses you were able to deduct on your tax return. So that could be your partial home office expenses. and your self-employment tax and whatever direct expenses, you know, you deduct. So that will be the number used. Now, if you have not filed your tax return, or if 2018 is completely irrelevant to your current situation, I heard that they will take 1099s. Now that's just gross income, and you can't deduct it. So yeah, there's a differential that you might actually end up getting more proceeds if you don't deduct any expenses, if you just use your 1099s, but then the risk is you're gonna have a harder time proving what you spent the money on to get the relief. So I'm thinking that they might take a profit and loss report. Basically, if you did not file your tax returns, I think that they will accept a bookkeeping software profit and loss statement, or some kind of statement where you report a statement of your income minus your business expenses. That's kind of all I know. But in terms of anything that didn't go out the door, like your home office expenses, you know, I don't know if they'll take an estimate based on what your tax return has been in the past. I'm not really sure. Do you have anything more to add on that, John?
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with all that. There's not a better black and white policy rule in place that I've found yet, but that does seem probably like what they'll do based on how the implementation has been rolled out so far. Yeah.
I think it might be a nice time for a poll, Jim. We had a couple of polls in the works, so maybe you could throw one of those out there for us. And then I had another question. In the long run, if you take unemployment before you accept any relief from SBA and PPP, you will pay tax on that unemployment. You will raise your unemployment insurance, and you may not be able to use unemployment later. So is it better to use unemployment as a last resort after you do or do not get the SBA funding? Do I need to read that again? Because that did not sound super clear to me.
I think I understood that.
It was the lovely way I delivered it, right?
I mean, I think, you know, I'm not an unemployment expert, but it just seems like, you know, yeah, you have certain amount of funds available to you to use. It kind of depends on your cash flow situation, I suppose. You know, you could go on unemployment just, again, for the short period of time if you do plan to apply. You know, I think the unemployment checks are probably slow coming as well. So seriously, you might as well apply for all you can and see what comes first. And there might be a short time lag between the time you start getting unemployment checks and when your loan comes through, and then you're not going to have to use that much, but at least it covers you in case, you know, at least you might have something coming in. And then you can stop your unemployment right away if you get the loan proceeds, or if you get nothing, if you end up getting denied and get nothing at all, then at least you have the unemployment already in the works. So it seems like depending on your cash flow need urgency, you know, you might want to, again, you can apply to everything and then turn it down or see what you get first.
So there's a live question that I wanted to ask. For S Corps, I'm confused about the income that stays with the corporation, the 1120s income versus the money that runs through the employee's end income, specifically in regards to the PPP.
I'm not a tax accountant, so I don't know for sure, but the S Corp is a corporation, so you are filing a separate tax return for the corporation. So I think that then that would be considered more of a standalone situation. And again, the PPP therefore would be based on employees. You know, if you have an S Corp and you are an employee, then your payroll will count, as far as my understanding. If you are an S Corp, but you're not an employee for yourself, then maybe it would default to then going back to your the net income of the business. I'm not really sure. since I'm not a tax accountant. So.
Okay, so last week's webinar, it was indicated that an S Corp that is not filed for 2019 corporate taxes can apply for PPP using the 2018 Schedule C as an income. Just want to confirm that that is correct.
Pretty sure.
Well, I'm actually, can we go back to the previous question real quick?
Where was it?
I'm wondering if that,
okay.
yeah, for S Corps, I'm.
Yeah, do you want me to reread it?
No, I have it in front of me.
Okay.
So it says for S Corps, I'm confused about the income that stays with the corporation, the 1120S income versus the money that runs through to employees and income. I mean, I wonder if that's a question in regards to the disaster loan rather than the PPP loan, because that calculation, as far as I'm aware, is more of a revenue-based calculation. And maybe this is a good time to interject a little bit about the disaster loan. So the way it was explained to me by somebody at SBA is the way they're calculating your potential disaster loan amount is gross revenue minus cost of goods sold. Divide that number by 12 for your monthly number, and then times that by 6 for a sort of 6-month multiple. So if you make $200,000 in revenue, you have $100,000 in cost of goods sold. You subtract the cost of goods sold, you have $100,000. Divide that by 12, it's a little more than $8,000 a month. Then you multiply that monthly number, 8,000, times 6 months. And so you have a potential $40,000 disaster loan calculation. Maybe I'm way off base and that's not what the S Corp question was about. But if it was, it would be the income as it's reflected on that S Corp tax return, and the revenue and the cost of goods sold that's on that S Corp's tax return as the business itself is taking out the disaster loan. Off my soapbox.
Do you want to circle back and answer the other question that Heidi had asked too?
Which was?
It was the one from here. I can.
It was from Maryland.
Yeah. Do you want me to read it?
Please. Last week. Yes,
last week it was indicated that if you are an S Corp and have not had yourself on payroll and have not filed 2019 tax returns, you can use your 2018 Schedule C to apply for PPP loan. Is that correct?
Probably. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't see why that would be wouldn't be allowed by the bank or the lender who's processing the application.
Lisa, do you have a thought on that?
No, other than what I said earlier and what John said.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question for John, if I may. One of the things a few of my clients are confused about is on the SBA loan, the EIDL loan, they ask for the income minus cost of goods sold. But my understanding is that they're not asking for minus expenses. And there's a difference between what's cost of goods sold on a profit and loss and what's expenses. And what if somebody doesn't have cost of goods sold because they're just a service?
Oh man, that's a really good question. You could have a 0 for that and just go off of the revenue.
Would that affect your ability to get approved for a loan if it looks like you don't have that much expenses? Not that I'm aware of, but I can double check on that. So you
That's
wouldn't,
really
or would you just put the expenses on the cost of goods sold line?
Yeah, I mean, for lack of cost of goods, if you just want to put your general administrative expenses in there to force the calculation, I don't think anyone is going to fact check you on that.
Okay.
So it could be a way to do it. I mean, if you're underreporting like your cost of goods sold to get a bigger loan amount, I don't think the SBA is going to hold that against you. You know, remember this is a loan that you do have to pay back. So I think they'd be okay with that, but I can try to double check before the call's over and circle back.
Cool.
I think we got a question from Sarah saying cost of goods sold for commercial photographers, how to calculate if everything is intellectual property, no physical delivery. So I think this is what you're sort of asking right now, Lisa. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Right. Okay. And then I have another, while you're getting that answer for us, John. My accountant told me that if my SBA number starts with 33, it's the revised app and should be good. Mine does start with 33, but I never got a confirmation email. Is there a way to check on the status of my SBA?
So with the revised app, the way I'm understanding it is you don't have a username and password the way that the older applications do. So short of emailing SBA and asking them for an update, which I'm sure is probably a pretty tall task for them to respond to those emails right now, there's no direct way to get an update. It's they'll call you, not you call them type of thing. And right now they're running about 3 to 4 weeks, I think, for that. But what I can do is, I recommend doing this, and I can also point you in the direction of some of these resources. What I recommend is reaching out to your local SBDC office. That's the Small Business Development Center. And there's kind of a whole bunch of them sprinkled around the country. Every big city has at least a few of them. And they are nonprofits who are funded completely by the SBA. And their whole job is to be the front line communicators with small businesses, especially in times like this. So what you can do is you can go to your local SBDC resource and say, hey, this is what happened with my loan application. This is what I've gotten so far, but I'm uncomfortable because of, fill in the blank. You haven't heard anything in over 3 weeks. You don't feel like you're getting enough information in regard to the grant, and they can help communicate the latest and greatest SBA info to you right then. Because the things we're saying on the call now might be out of date come Monday morning, especially in regards to the grant, the EIDL, and the sole proprietor. I feel like the other portion of the PPP is pretty well known at this point, knock on wood. But things are evolving so rapidly that if you develop a relationship with your local SBDC, they can kind of email you like every morning, every couple of days, like how things are changing and how SBA is processing those applications. Because, frankly, it's an unprecedented amount of applications that they're trying to process for the EIDL. So they're figuring it out as they go along as well.
Okay, so two things I just wanted to say from our Jeremy says, I don't think my application was processed yet. I have not had any communication from them. When I call the SBA, I'm told 2 weeks from the application date to hear anything. So that's just a general information that Jeremy experienced. I do want to ask a follow-up question from Steve. If we applied for PPP loan last week with my bank, but they are now opening the applications for the sole proprietor today, do we need to reapply?
Probably not.
Yeah,
but I would check in with your bank.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think if you already got into the queue to say I'm interested in applying, then you're still in the queue. Because I was told before today, if you're a sole proprietor, you want to apply, even though the application isn't open yet, just get in the queue. So that's my understanding. I wanted to circle back real quick on that cost of goods sold question, because now I'm reading it, and just a little quick more on that. If you are the question was, I'm a intellectual property, I'm a photographer, I have no physical cost of goods sold, but what else can be considered cost of goods sold is any cost that goes into delivery of your sale. So if you have subcontractors, if you hire a stylist or any other subcontractors or editors or anything to help you with that project, that's cost of goods sold. If you have any reimbursed expenses, you have to buy props or anything else that your client is going to be reimbursing you for, or that you just bought for the specific project, and then that is cost of goods sold. I was talking, and then any expenses would be any indirect expenses that you're incurring that's not specifically related to the project. So I just thought I'd clarify that.
Cool. That's really helpful.
Um,
Thank you for asking and answering.
so I wanted, to get back to our questions. How long, and I feel like this is a question into the wind, but how long does it take to get approved for these various programs, and how long does it take to receive funds? It's a worthy question, but it's an unknown, right?
I mean, I was saying to you guys earlier that I heard from a photographer this morning that they applied on Monday. The bank approved them Wednesday. The SBA approved them Friday. So, I mean, Wednesday and then Thursday. So, and they haven't received the funds yet, but that's the only progression I've heard beyond we got approved, we got our confirmation number from anyone just yet.
Yeah, very, very small amounts of PPP applicants are getting approved and funded this week. But I think there's just such a incredible amount of them that, you know, in actual numbers, most people haven't gotten approved or funded yet, but it is happening. And it is somewhat based on the bank that they're working with. You know, I know some lenders that are accepting applications but haven't actually submitted them to the SBA yet for processing. So they're definitely not approved and funded yet. But you know, the bigger banks have started to do that this week, like Heather mentioned. The disaster and the grant loans, it's a lot of people applied. Some people have been approved. Not a lot of people have gotten money yet. I think it's close to zero for the grants, and for the disaster loans, I don't have a good sense of how many people have gotten that loan, but I'm guessing it's pretty low. And you know, late April will be when they start to hit bank accounts, if I had to guess.
Well, I hate to say this one, but it's an experience of one of our attendees, so I want to say it. I had a confirmation number for the EIDL loan submission from 2 weeks ago. No word to date, so I called today and I was told to reapply. So that's not good, but
Oh boy.
I know. So we all need to just continually follow up, you know, everyone asking the question of, was it received and how do I follow up? I think that the information that John mentioned from the SBDCs are really going to be important for people to follow up so that they can check on these things and make sure that they really are in these queues. Unfortunately, it's just elbow grease, and then wait.
Yeah, I also did hear, now that I think about it, that if you applied, if you were like really on top of it and managed to get in and applied to the SBA site early on, and then they changed the application, they made it much smoother and simpler, and they gave that easy box to check, yes, I want to be considered for the $10,000 emergency grant. I did hear that you should reapply if you applied before that new application came out.
So everyone reapply if you haven't already. And I mean, worst case scenario, you get approved twice. I don't know. But you know, the diligence and staying on top of it. I know it's stressful, and I know not getting into stressful. There's just stress by the tons. But you know, be diligent and continue the processes and checking on things and reapply. Like Lisa just said, they've changed things. You know. Reapply. Does everybody, okay, so my next question is additional resources. So John, you've mentioned a few. Lisa, I don't know if you have some too, but and are there any additional resources that we haven't covered today that the audience should probably know a little bit about or a lot about?
I've heard of a few, you know, if you can't find a bank, you know, there are some other private organizations that are offering grants and loans that you might want to look into. For example, your local city. You know, I live in Oakland, and somebody told me the city of Oakland is actually accepting some applications. They have some funds that are available for a grant. I heard Facebook has a fund. Verizon has a fund. What?
I heard the Facebook one yesterday as well.
Yeah. The other thing is Intuit. I think it's whether or not you use QuickBooks. Intuit apparently is working on being able to accept applications for this SBA loan, the PPP loan. And there is a place on Intuit where you can say, yes, I'm interested. They haven't come out with it yet, but they said they're working on it. So that's pretty interesting. Because actually I know that they are, I think, working on becoming a bank anyway. And so maybe they're able to do this. But Intuit actually has a nice place where it walks you through a quick questionnaire as to what you're eligible to apply for. And then they have a link as to some places that you can go.
There is a question here. Any thoughts on supporting documents needed for the PPP or the sole proprietor, no employees? How do I substantiate the payroll, et cetera?
The first thing would be payroll registers. If you use a payroll provider, Gusto or ADP or Intuit or QuickBooks, then there always are official payroll registers. So that would suffice. And I think probably most banks are also asking for the payroll tax returns, the 941, the quarterly 941 federal, and the DE9 for the states, well, actually for California at least. So they will probably want that as well. And then if nothing else, if you use an accounting software like QuickBooks, then you can print out the profit and loss report. Or if nothing else, you maybe just create one on Excel, an official profit and loss type, or the statement of income minus expenses, what that looks like, and quantify it that way. And then of course your tax return. I heard, like when it comes time for evaluating the forgiveness, and they're probably going to ask for real backup, like your bank statements, receipts, lease agreements, I don't know what, but they'll be asking for documentation, I'm sure.
Well, I'm happy to see from our poll results that have you received the assistance from our last poll, which was, have you applied for any financial assistance? If so, what kind? But also, have you received any assistance? 3% of our responders said yes. So that feels good, at least. I mean, 83% of our responders said no, so that doesn't feel as good, but it is nice to know that some people are getting money in their pockets. The next question I had, was, I'm so sorry. I talked, I'm sorry, I'm doing this all a little bit wrong. Let's see. Do you know about the credibility of Lendio, Divi, and Frontera? I had never heard of them, but they are allowing people to apply, and they will shop your application around to the banks. John, I feel like you have something to say.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not familiar with any of those three, to be honest. But if they're operating in a similar capacity to Cabbage, I would be, comfortable with them, because Cabbage, seems to be legit the way they're going about it. I think if it was me personally going out to do this today, I would be more comfortable looking at the Google Doc Excel file that went out from Gusto. I'm kind of like fact checking it against my informal list, and it seems like pretty right on. But I know anecdotally the SBA is opening up assistance for this program to lenders or lending adjacent folks that are not traditionally in the SBA world, like Cabbage. So I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Lendio, Divi, and Frontera were.
It's actually
were legit.
It's actually
Fundra.
Fundra.
Yeah,
They
I see that now.
Yeah,
Fundra.
he wrote in, but
Fundera.
I didn't mispronounce it, actually. It was written in, it was a typo in the beginning. Okay.
Mhm.
So I feel like we've sort of covered everything on our agenda, and most of the questions, I feel like. Do you guys have any parting advice for us? And Heather, also, of course, do you have any other questions that you wanted to maybe
No,
ask the panel?
all the ones I was texted were asked.
Okay.
I'm wondering if there's I see there's a lot of Q&A that I haven't had a chance to read through on the call. Is there any means of being able to reply, especially like if some of them I can answer are real quick answers? Would there any be a way for me to
I'm
provide
not sure
answers?
that we keep this once it's gone. So if you have quick answers, I would love for us to, Jim, if you wanted to do that now, I could, Jim, I know you're probably muted, but I wouldn't mind if you could just comment in here right now, because I think it's wonderful that Lisa wants to answer all these questions, and I'd love to make that possible for her if
I'm not saying
if we
all,
can.
but I'm just saying,
Sorry,
I briefly
sorry.
saw if there's a few real simple, quick ones I can answer, that if there's a means for that, then that might be good.
Lisa, in the Q&A panel, can you see where it says to type an answer to the question?
Yes.
Then that probably would just be the way to do it. If you just click on the type answer button.
I know, but I'm saying once this ends, I just haven't been able to focus on them yet. And if I can't think clearly enough to do it right now, is there a means to do it once this call ends?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can go through and answer as many questions as you want, and then we can provide answers to all of the attendees.
Okay. So with that said, go ahead.
I'm just putting a chat response together that includes 4 non-bank lenders. So, the ones that were mentioned, Fundera, Divvy, could be totally legit. But here are 4 that I know are completely legit.
Are these
so
going to everyone, Jim, or is this only for the panelists to see?
This one went to panelists and attendees. I
good.
selected that option.
Oh, great. Oh, perfect. It looks like it did go to everybody. Great. Okay, well, we're right about the hour mark, and I just wanted to say thank you to this panel for being so generous with your time and your knowledge, and of course, Heather, for you to help ask these questions and be on the panel is always a joy for me personally, and I'm sure everybody as well. So I just wanted to take a second and say the most heartfelt thank you to you all. It's such a confusing time, and you're making it less confusing, and it's always nice to end the week with some answers and solutions. And so I just wanted to thank you again. Thanks, Jim, and everyone for attending. We obviously we're going to continue this webinar series, and next week we are planning to have a panel of creatives to see what's happening on that side of the universe right now, which super important as well. So thank you everyone for attending, and I think that's a wrap.
Thank you, Heidi.
I hope
for
that
all
was
your
helpful.
work, too. And
Yeah,
thank you, Lisa
good luck
and
to-
John. We really appreciate it.
Well, hopefully that was helpful. Good luck to everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Bye.
your weekend.
Have a great
Bye.
weekend.
Wash your hands.
Right?